In Gilroy, California, and welcome to Clinical Medical Assisting. Today we're going to talk about how to take an apical pulse on a patient. And I gave out your PowerPoints last week. How many people here actually read them? And how many people looked up the glossary words? Good, because you should all be familiar with the terminology because I'm going to use them today throughout the presentation. So taking an apical pulse is basically listening to the heart. And when you listen to the heart, it is the most accurate form of taking a pulse. Also, you listen for a full minute. So it's contrary to just taking a radial pulse and listening for 15 seconds. You're not going to do that, or multiply it times 4, or take it for 30 seconds. You're going to listen to an apical pulse always for 1 full minute. And you record it as always for 1 full minute. And it's more accurate than any other pulses because you're listening to the heart, and that's where all the other pulses originate from. So when is it used and why is it used? It's used because it is the most accurate way to measure a pulse. It is used on infants and children, basically because they're wiggly and giggly all over. They're not going to let you feel for their brachial pulse. Listening to the heart is going to be much easier for you. Plus, they're so loud, their chest walls are so thin and small, it's pretty easy as long as they're not screaming and crying. So if you have an infant, you can listen to them before they start crying. You try not to wake them up. A child usually will let you, if you let them see what the stethoscope is, that it's not going to hurt them, they'll let you put it on their chest most of the time. It's used for people with bradycardia, tachycardia, or irregular pulses. It's also used for people getting heart medications. Some medications slow down the heart so much, you have to make sure the patient's heart rate is at a certain rate before you give the medication or hold the medication. And usually that number typically is 60. It's also used for anytime anyone has an irregular heartbeat or heart rate. So if you feel for a pulse, a peripheral radial pulse, and it's a little irregular, like it skips a beat here and there, then you need to automatically go to the apical pulse. So you're going to use your stethoscope, and what you're going to do is to locate the PMI, that is the point of maximal impulse. And so this is your heart. It's typically the size of your fist, and it sits in the middle. This is your sternum or your breastbone. It sits in the middle of your chest, and it's slightly tilted and pointed. This is the apex of the heart. It's the pointy part, and it points down so that usually this pointy part is about at the 5th or 6th intercostal space. And that's the PMI, the point of maximal impulse. And the truth being is that if you can't hear it at the PMI, it's typically right below the nipple or it's above the nipple. If you can't hear it, you're going to move your stethoscope around to a place where you can hear it. And a lot of times it's on a part of the body that's not near the nipple. So you need to know what the PMI is for testing and for integrity, but the truth is you're going to listen to the heart wherever you can hear the heartbeat and count accurately. So the anatomical landmarks are the midclavicular line, which just is a fancy word of saying the middle of your clavicle. Now I've washed my hands, I've washed my stethoscope, I check the ID of my patient, and I've asked for permission to touch them. You don't want to walk over and just start exposing the chest at all. You want to ask for permission. So Mr. Gonzalez has given me permission to touch him, and this is his midclavicular line, middle of the clavicle. I can count down 5 or 6 intercostal spaces, but the truth be told, that actually hurts, and I don't recommend inflicting pain on people. I just don't like that. And yeah, I'm funny that way. So typically I look for the nipple, and I go below the nipple or above the nipple, and if I don't hear it, then I move closer to the sternal border. And you can have access to the patient. When you expose their chest, you want to expose it minimally. You don't want to just strip them down. So I can go this way, or I can go underneath the clothing this way. So let me tell you a funny story, and then we'll go ahead and start counting the patient's pulse. There was this lady, a young lady came in. She was in her 20s. She was gorgeous, long blonde hair, large breasts. She was a beautiful young gal. She came into the doctor's office and she had a heart arrhythmia. So she was being worked up for some sort of heart arrhythmia. And the physician was working with a student doctor, a medical student, and because she had a very interesting and unusual heart rate, the physician called in the medical student and said, "Come in here, I want you to look I want you to listen to this woman's heart rate. And the woman was bare-chested. She had everything off. She was large-breasted, and like I said, she was gorgeous. The medical student was the same age as the patient. And so the medical student, of course, listened to the woman's heartbeat, and the physician said, "Isn't that great? Wasn't that interesting? Didn't you hear it?" And the student said, "Yes, yes, I did." And he was rather red, and he left the room. And he confessed to the physician later that he was so intimidated by this woman's beauty and her being half naked that all he could hear was his own heartbeat in the stethoscope. He couldn't hear anything but the pulsing of his own heart in his ears. So usually I'm a proponent of honesty, but in that case I think he used good judgment, not by saying he really listened to her when he really didn't. So from that, let's just go on. Okay. I get nervous and I get